Welcome back to the Conservation Cast. I'm your host, Devan George, the Communications Coordinator here at the Pike County Conservation District. Thank you all so much for listening in to our episode about invasive species. This is an important topic to discuss now more than ever as we're entering spring and everything is just starting to grow, and you might be getting outside into your lawn or in your garden and you might be asking yourself, what is that new plant that's suddenly popping up in my yard? In this episode, I'll be talking about what invasive species are, how they spread, and how you can help to stop their movement. I'll also be giving some examples, some of which may ring a bell for some of you. A lot of these species that I'm going to be talking about are quite infamous, and you might just not know the whole story behind them or where they can be found. In a later episode, we'll be talking more specifically about some of the invasive species we have here in Pike County, primarily lawn and garden plants, aquatic plants, and insects that are directly affecting your home and your property. But today we're going to be talking about some background on invasive species, so let's get started. First things first, what is an invasive species? An invasive species is any kind of living organism that is not native to an ecosystem and can cause that ecosystem harm. Invasive species can be plants, fish, amphibians, insects, fungus, and even bacteria. To be an invasive, they have to be able to adapt to their new environment easily. This might mean that their past environment was similar to their new ecosystem, or it might mean that they are just able to adapt better than other species to a new environment. It has to be able to reproduce quickly, gaining large populations that can quickly overexploit the resources in that new ecosystem that they've adapted to. And it must harm property, the economy, or the native plants and animals in the region in order to be considered an invasive species. So you might be wondering, how can they harm the economy? They're an insect. There are a number of ways that these species can be detrimental to the economy. Agricultural pests can destroy entire fields of crops and dramatically affect food systems. For example, the brown marmorated stink bug has become a significant agricultural pest in the mid-Atlantic region. And I'm sure many of you have seen stink bugs in your home. They feed on a wide variety of crops, including ornamental trees and shrubs, fruit crops like peaches, apples, grapes, and pears, as well as vegetable crops like green beans, asparagus, and soybeans and corn. So a lot of the big crops that we have here in the United States are attacked by one invasive species. They can also affect the economy because entire native species of trees can be decimated by invasives. The Dutch elm disease is transmitted to trees by elm bark beetles, and since 1930, the disease has spread from Ohio, where it originated, through most of the country, killing over half of the elm trees in the northern United States. Especially detrimental to the economy here in Pike County are pests that are unsightly and a nuisance that can cause damage to the tourism industry. In a later episode, we're going to be talking about the spotted lanternfly and the honeydew, which is a sticky substance that they emit, and how it can cover trees, yards, property, road signs, and cause it to be blackened and look incredibly gross. I'm going to be honest with you, it just looks gross. The impacts of invasive species on our natural ecosystems and our economy can cost billions of dollars each year. So the damage that they do to our economy is not insignificant. Of course, invasive species can also damage the environment, which is why I'm talking about it. As an invasive species moves into an ecosystem, they can outcompete a native species for food, water, and shelter. And this affects the entire ecosystem. Once they wipe out one native species, it affects all the other native species. A good example of this is the Asian carp, which are huge, hard-headed silver carp which pose a threat to not just native species through overcompetition, but also boaters. The fish can leap out of the water when startled by boat engines, often colliding with people and causing injuries. These fish can grow to more than 100 pounds. So imagine a 100-pound fish with a hard head coming at you through the air. You can see how it could cause injuries. Asian carp were first imported to the United States in the 1970s to filter pond water in fish farms in Arkansas. It was flooding that allowed them to escape these fish farms and establish reproducing populations in the wild by the early 1980s. Asian carp are spreading upward through the Illinois River and are now threatening the Great Lakes. Once establishing in an ecosystem, like most bad invasive species, they're almost impossible to get rid of. Adult Asian carp have no natural predators in North America, and the females can lay approximately 500,000 eggs each time that they spawn. Invasive species are really able to thrive when they have no natural species that will hunt them. For example, in Guam in the late 1940s or early 1950s, brown tree snakes were accidentally introduced. There were no animals on the island to hunt the snakes, but the island was filled with birds, rodents, and other small animals that the snakes liked to eat. And the snakes quickly multiplied, and they were responsible for the extinction of 9 of the island's 11 forest-dwelling bird species. According to the National Wildlife Federation, invasive species are among the leading threats to native wildlife. Approximately 42% of threatened or endangered species are at high risk due to invasives. So that's what invasive species are. So how do invasive species spread to new ecosystems? The answer, which might not surprise you, is that they are primarily spread by humans. As people and goods move around the globe, they can often accidentally bring invasives into new ecosystems. For example, zebra mussels came to the Great Lakes in 1980s in the ballast water of ships that came across the ocean. So by 1990, zebra mussels and quagga mussels, which is a close relative to zebra mussels, had invested all the Great Lakes and now have spread to bodies of water in 29 states, moving on the hulls of boats that go from the Great Lakes to other bodies of water without being cleaned. Aquatic invasive species of plants and animals are the primary reason it's so important to clean your watercraft before moving it from one body of water to another. For example, the Delaware River right here in Pike County. If you're going to take your boat to a new body of water, make sure that you clean, drain, and treat your boat. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in our aquatic invasive plants episode. So that's how invasives are spread accidentally. But sometimes invasive species are introduced as pets that have been let loose into a new ecosystem or have gotten away. Many people have released pet Burmese pythons into the Everglades in South Florida. The huge snakes can grow to 20 feet. Pythons, which are native to the jungles of Southeast Asia, have few natural predators in the Everglades. They feast on many local species, including white ibis and limpkin, which are 2 revered species of wading bird. And they can be terrifying to humans. It's a 20-foot snake, and this can cause people to avoid this beautiful natural area and a national park, once again affecting Florida's tourism industry. Finally, some species are introduced intentionally. This has decreased as people have become more aware of invasive species, and there are now laws in place that prevent the carrying of new species into the United States. However, there is an example of this which is both absolutely terrible, but absolutely tickles me, and that is the European starling. According to the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, all the European starlings in all of North America descended from 100 birds set loose in New York Central Park in the early 1890s. The birds were intentionally released by a group who wanted America to have all of the birds Shakespeare ever mentioned. It took several tries, but eventually the population took off, so they released multiple times. Today, more than 200 million European starlings range from Alaska to Mexico, and many people consider them a pest. And I just love imagining those Shakespeare enthusiasts standing in Central Park thinking that history was going to smile upon them. Little did they know. So this brings us to the big question. What can we do to stop the spread of invasives? And the first thing we can do, you're already doing. So good job. You're learning about invasive species and you're taking the time to learn more. You can learn to identify these species, and when you see them, whether they're in your own yard or out and about in your community, and report your sighting to the Penn State County Extension Office. Our extension office in Pike County is in Milford. The key to controlling the spread of these species on a larger level is rapid detection, which is easier to do when the public is reporting findings. People at the extension office can't be everywhere all the time, so they rely on the community to report their findings. On your own property or yard, to combat these plants, you can plant native plants. Now is the time when many of us are planning our 2020 gardens. So now is the time to keep native and pollinator-friendly plants in mind. Also, as you're prepping your garden and yard for the summer, remove any invasives that you've identified with your new kick butt identification skills that you got from learning all about invasives. As I mentioned with the zebra mussels, regularly cleaning your outdoor gear, your boats, your boots, your tires, and any other equipment you use outdoors that can spread invasive species to new places. Right now especially, this also applies to your vehicles. Spotted lanternfly likes to hook onto your car, and they can hold on tight no matter how fast you are going on the highway. If you're coming to Pike County to camp this summer, make sure that you're buying your firewood near your campsite, and that means within 30 miles. This is a good rule of thumb for whether you're camping in Pike County or anywhere else. So don't bring your firewood from home, buy it locally, and if at the end of your camping trip you have some of that local firewood that's left over, leave it at your campsite for the next campers to use. This way you're not bringing any firewood back from Pike County to your home state. Invertebrates and plants can easily hitch a ride on firewood you haul to or from a campsite. You could inadvertently introduce a new invasive either to Pike County, or by taking firewood from Pike County back to your home state, you could introduce it there as well. So as I said, we're going to be having a follow-up episode on more specific invasive species, garden plants, aquatic plants, and spotted lanternfly, and we'll go into more depth on control of each of these specific species. These are just some general rules in order to stop spreading invasive species. If you have a specific invasive plant question, you can post them to our Facebook, and I will do my best to address them in the upcoming episodes. I want to thank you all for listening to this episode of the Conservation Cast. As a reminder, all our episodes are available on our website, www.pikeconservation.org, and on iTunes. Just search the Conservation Cast and hit subscribe to hear our future episodes. Financial and other support for this podcast has been provided by the Department of Environmental Protection's 2019 Environmental Education Grants Program. Thank you all for listening, and I'll talk to you next time here on the Conservation Cast.